he put it in my hand. And at the moment he put it in my hand, I heard that same voice that I'd heard in 92 that said, unless you change your ways and follow me, that is how you will spend eternity.
Welcome to Cajun Miracles. I have with me as my guest today Paul McLean. Paul's back again to continue his testimony. Welcome, Paul.
Yeah, Rick, it's a pleasure to be back. I think I already been with you twice on the testimony thing now, and as I've been going around lately talking to different places, talking to some guys, presenting at little groups, a constant point that has come up is the idea of, is God with me, even though I'm not thinking of him, even though I'm not talking about him, aware of him, paying any attention to him? Is he with me? And, before my conversion experience, when I was really just totally engulfed in work, I remember thinking in my office on more than one occasion, that there was anything that couldn't come across that phone, that couldn't come across that desk that I couldn't handle or find somebody to handle for me. It was so arrogant an attitude. And so God wasn't even around in my mind at the time. At least so I thought. And so what I'd like to do now on this program is to show you how God has a way of letting you know that. He really does. He let me know it. He let me know it years after my conversion experience, really. And so that's what I'd like to share on this program, Rick. Either in the agriculture field or the oil and gas field, which are two very dangerous occupations, you can have something happen very fast. After my conversion experience, I used to really think about the fact that I had pretty large agricultural operations, pretty large oil and gas thing for independent. And I kept thinking to myself numerous times after my conversion, I never really hurt anybody, never had any big injuries, never had a death, and I worked hundreds of people. And I nearly wiped myself out at least 3 times. Once in the agricultural end, a cane wagon flipped over on top of me, and 2 times in the oil and gas area, I pretty much just barely survived that. But anybody else, I really, we came off not damaging anybody. And so after my conversion, I would think often about, Lord, even though I wasn't thinking about you, or you had to be there. You just had to be there. By that time, I appreciated him. I said, you just had to be there. And it was just a question I would ask him. And ultimately, years later, he answered it. And that's what I'd like to share. So I guess I'll start with, let me go back and get those approximate times in there. So the oil and gas portion of my work activity was the late 80s, early 90s. And my conversion experience was in 92, March 1st of 92. That's when my whole life changed. So, and I was right up to the end of it. And so after my conversion, I began to, I'd say that around 95 or 96, I had begun going around to different venues talking on various things. And I happened to be at St. Joseph Church in Chauvin, Louisiana. And I was doing a talk that night on the Blessed Mother. Had been about 94, 95. And I finished my talk, and they had a very unusually larger crowd. Typically, the crowds are small, but this was a larger crowd. And after the talk, a man walked up to me, a big guy walked up to me. He said, "Are you the Paul McLean that used to run such and such oil company?" And I went to myself. I said, "Oh, Lord, what's coming?" You know, because that was a whole different life. And I said, "Oh, my gosh, what's getting ready to hit me here?" I said, "Yeah, that's me." And he said, "Well, let me tell you a story. Let me tell you a story." And so he started to tell me one of the things that I was involved in. I was involved and part owner in this oil docking facility in Lafitte, Louisiana. And he told me that he happened to work for a drilling company that we were using at the time to do all our inland water drilling. And he ran a crew boat for him. And he says, "I picked you up at your dock in Lafitte." And he gave me enough detail that I knew he was right on. That was us. And so he said, "You got in my crew boat, and I brought you out to the drilling rig." He said, and after we tied up, and you went up into the rig and got up there to get your information. And he said, "I sat around for a while. You were gone for a while. I sat around." And he said, "I got bored." And he said, "I got out my crew boat, and I began to walk down the deck barges that are tied up along to the rig. Usually have 3 or 4 deck barges out there with all sorts of tools and equipment and stuff you might need during the drilling operations." And he said, "I just walked down." He said, "I was picking up," and like a lot of those deck barges, they would, as the items were loaded on the barge from the landing and all, you would get pieces of clam shells and different stuff. He said, "I was walking down the barge and I was picking up clam shells and just skimming them across the water, just using up time." And he said, "I got to the end of one of the barges, and he said there was a little pile of mud down there, and he said out of that mud there was a stick that was sticking out of the mud. So he said, I bent down to pick up the stick, and I pulled the stick out the mud." He said, to my surprise, it really wasn't a stick. It was a crucifix stuck in that mud. He said, "I couldn't believe my eyes." He said, "I ran back to the crew boat, and he said, I washed it off, and sure enough, it was a crucifix." And he said, "I just didn't know what to do. When you came out of," he told me, he said, "when you came out of the drilling rig, he said, I wanted to tell you about it." He said, "But," he said, "I was scared to tell you because you might have thought I was some kind of religious guy, overboard religious guy, and never use us and tell my bosses, and you would never, and I'd get fired, or you'd never use us to drill another well." He said, "All kind of things were going through my mind." He said, "So I didn't know what to do." And then all of a sudden, he said, I heard, he says, he told me, he said, "I heard deep down inside," I said, "Hold that cross, you're going to see him another day." So he did. He went home at the end of his hitch, and he hung that cross up in his on his wall behind his bed, I believe he told me, where it sat. Let's say that was 90, where it sat to 5 years maybe, because this might have been around 95. Long after, quite a few years after my conversion. Again, the conversion was in 92, and this was a while after. So he held it there. And so, lo and behold, here I go to Chauvin. He lives in Chauvin. His wife comes up to him that evening. He says, "Why don't you come to church with me? There's a man talking on the Blessed Mother." And his name's Timmy. Timmy says, "No, I'm not going. That's all right." He said, "Come on, Tim." And she said, "He's from Houma." And he says, "He's going to talk about the Blessed Mother." Tim said, "No." And she said, "Come on, his name's Paul McLean. Come on." And he said, "What's his name?" And she said, "Paul McLean from Houma." And he told her, "I think I am going to go." And so he took his little cross and put it in his pocket, not a little cross, as you're going to see in a little while. He took that crucifix, put it in his pocket, and he went to the prayer meeting. And so after the prayer meeting, after feeling very comfortable that I was, in fact, the guy, because it had been years, that's when he came up to me and asked me the question. He had held that cross there the whole time, just by what the Lord had put on his heart. And so I looked at him. I said, Tim, that's a beautiful story. He said, yeah. He said, it was something to see you here tonight. He said, I just never figured. I said, do you have the cross with you? Do you have the crucifix with you? And he said, yeah, I got it with me. I said, do you mind if I see it or even hold it? He said, oh, no, here you go. He pulled out his pocket, and he put it in my hand. And at the moment he put it in my hand, I heard that same voice that I had heard in 92 that said, unless you change your ways and follow me, that is how you will spend eternity. March 1st, 1992, that same male voice said clearly, and you thought I wasn't with you all those years? That stunned me. Man, my legs buckled, because never would I have imagined that he would have answered that question. And so what he was telling me was that you weren't thinking about me. You had no care about me. You really weren't spending any time with me. He said, but I was with you. And he cared enough about me after my conversion and before, of course, to let me know that, in fact, he had been. So you see, he put that cross in that man's hand, knowing that at some point in time I would have this conversion, and I would be thinking, boy, the Lord must have been with me all those years. He cared enough to answer that question. Never would I have thought. And so it's amazing, isn't it?
It's fascinating that we have free will, but God, He knows what we're going to end up doing down there.
Well, he's got the whole. He's watching the whole movie. I mean, we got the free will within the movie to make changes, but since he knows all, he knows how we're going to choose.
He knows how we're going to choose.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is that I guess He knows how some others are going to choose and are not going to choose Him.
Yeah, in the St. Bridget prayers, I've been saying the St. Bridget prayers, the 15 St. Bridget prayers.
I say them too.
You know, they say, and from the cross, he wept bitterly. Remember that? Mm-hmm. He wept I think it's the 5th prayer. He wept bitterly for all those that would not choose him. And so you're right. But you know, the care, the compassion that he has, the real care that he's going to answer that. What I thought was just every word matters, Rick. Every word that comes out of our mouth matters. And that he cared enough to answer that question. He knew I really wanted the answer to it.
He knew it would have effect on you.
Yeah.
He knew you needed to hear it.
Yeah.
For confidence.
Yeah. And that even though, how many times you don't think you're doing something that maybe you shouldn't be doing, and nobody knows. Nobody knows but me. I'm only hurting myself. No.
Do you think, remember, I don't know where I heard this from or read it, but no one can come to Jesus unless the Father calls him?
Yeah. They have to go through Jesus. Yeah, no one can go to the Father except he goes through Jesus.
Is that what that meant?
Yeah. Jesus is...
Like, in other words, the Father has to call you in order for you...
Yeah, and you have to go through Jesus. You have to... If you're going to go to the Father, Jesus brings you to the Father.
Right.
The Holy Spirit brings you to Jesus. Jesus brings you to relationship with the Father.
I guess it connects with when he said, my sheep know my voice.
Yeah.
So I guess sometime in our lives, even though we don't know it, there's some kind of way that he can tell if we hear his voice.
Yeah, well, I think, he's reading.
And eventually, they'll make a difference.
Yeah, he's reading our hearts. And so, even though our mind may be in a different place, he knows our hearts, what's in our hearts. And he knew what was coming for me, that the conversion and what was going to lead up to the conversion and that I didn't have a clue. But he understood, and he knew that I would choose to do things that would bring me to that point in Chauvin. He understands. It's like he's already seen the movie. He knows it.
That's what's fascinating. He knew that you would choose that moment. He lets us go about our merry way, go have our little things we want to do for free will. But on the things that matter to him, he already knows we're gonna choose.
And he look at Tim. Tim took that crucifix with faith. I had no faith at the time to speak of, at least consciously. But he took that crucifix. He went home faithfully and hung it up on the back of the wall behind his bed where it sat for years until just the right. He could have easily not gone, and that would have been an opportunity. But his wife said the right words and caught his attention,
and that's a pretty big thing to not show somebody this cross you just found in the mud.
Right.
I mean, that took some obedience.
Right. I think I actually have. I think we're going to put up a picture of that crucifix too.
We're going to go ahead and show it right now. This is that.
Yeah, you see it. It was no small thing. It looked just like, as you can tell, it looked just like a stick sticking out the mud. Blew him away when he saw it. Only to, let's see, maybe 5, 6, 7 years later, put it in my hand and hear the Lord tell me, and you thought I wasn't with you all those years? Yes, he was. Yes, he was. Thank God he was. And so I wanted to share that. Oftentimes we think we're not being, we're doing something and maybe nobody's looking and nobody will know. I don't know about you, Rick, but I've been there. Maybe nobody will know. And
I'm on holiday today. We'll take the day off.
No, God knows. God knows. And we're going to deal with all those things one day. And I just wanted to share that because it was so directly connected to the time period at my conversion. So many years after my conversion, I never would have expected to have been brought back to a period before in that way.
I guess, as much as we want to grasp it in our head and understand, there's just no way we're going to understand.
No.
Blind faith is about the best we can do.
Yeah, there's no way. He's so far up. His ways are so far above our ways that we will never understand. So, guys, especially, I guess, that's when we usually come up. This topic usually comes up when I go to men's meetings or talk to men's groups or whatever. Guys, he's watching all the time. And we're going to have to deal with the things that we have done. Of course, we think nobody knows but us. But, God knows. And he's given us a sacrament to deal with that. And there's a way out. He knows us better than we know ourselves. There's a way out of that. So I thought it ought to be tied to I think this incident should appropriately be tied to the conversion because it really looped back into prior to the conversion time. It's just an astounding thing he can do.
It's kind of like that old saying, if you love something, let it go. If it comes back, it's yours. If it doesn't, it never was.
Yeah.
He creates us. He just puts us out into this wild world. And
I don't know if you remember that story Father Dwayne used to tell all the time about the little boy that had the boat. He bought this. Let's see how he built this little boat. Okay. You probably remember a little boat, a beautiful little wooden boat, and he loved to play with that little boat. And one day, it was raining. There was the white water in the street. And he was playing with that little boat, and all of a sudden, it was like in the curb, next to the curb, And as it went along in the street, it got closer and closer to the drain. And he couldn't catch it. He couldn't run fast enough to catch it and went down the drain. He lost his little boat. Oh, it made him so sad. And then, months later, he's walking down the street in the town, and he looks in the window, this like little used, like a little pawn shop, used store, He looked in there and he says, wait a minute, that's my boat. Because he knew the boat he had made. Mm-hmm. That's my boat. So he goes in the store and he tells the man, he says, how much do you want for that boat? The man gave him the price. He said, I want that boat. I'll buy that boat. And he bought it, and he was so happy because not only did he create the boat, but he bought the boat back. And so he created it, and he paid the price to buy it back. That's kind of like God. He created us, and then he paid the price.
Interesting.
He paid the price to buy it, to get us back, to take the, to take us back. So I'll never forget. He used to tell that story so much. He loved his little boat. Well, God loves us like that little boat, you see. So thank you for the opportunity to come back, Rick.
Thank you, Paul.
I enjoyed it.
So thank you very much, everybody. And don't forget, if you can, like, subscribe, and share with others. Thank you all.